wind is howling, going to sleep is completely out of the question. You begin to wonder why you chose to stay, even though the experts said, leave now. Living in Indiana, we are a little removed from the threat of dealing with hurricanes, but that doesn't mean we should be ignorant of them. Today I'm going to inform you about the makings of a hurricane, describe their different strengths, and go over a few hurricanes that have made U.S. history. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as the NOAA, would describe a hurricane as the most severe category of the meteorological phenomenon known as the tropical cyclone. Tropical cyclones are storms that have thunderstorm activity and rotate counterclockwise. These storms are generally around 300 miles in diameter, but overall can vary in size. The small ones could be the size of Massachusetts. The largest ones could be the size of Texas. So the center of the storm is called the eye. In this diagram, we have the eye labeled here. In that eye, you could experience light winds. You could even have sunny skies. From the eye would be the eye wall. That's the most intense portion of the storm. The eye wall contains the heaviest rains, the strongest winds, just really the most intense portion. Then moving away from that, you have the different rain bands. In those rain bands, closer to the center, they would be stronger. Further away from the center, they would get less intense. But on a landfalling hurricane, the rain bands are usually what produce tornadoes. And that is what causes a lot of damage. In order for a hurricane to form, several conditions must be present to be favorable for development. A pre-existing area of low pressure, warm tropical waters, moisture, and usually light winds that are aloft. That way the thunderstorms can cause convection, and then as they cluster together will begin to spin. The NOAA defines a tropical depression as an organized system of clouds and thunderstorms with a defined surface circulation and maximum sustained winds of 38 miles per hour or less. Once the winds exceed this, a tropical storm status is given, and at that time it's then a named system. These tropical systems have winds of 39 to 73 miles per hour. Once they get to that 74 miles per hour, then it's considered a hurricane. So now that I've explained how a hurricane forms, I'm going to give you some information on how hurricanes are actually measured. So hurricanes are measured by what is named the Saffir-Simpson scale. Created by Herbert Saffir, a structural engineer by trade, initially began measuring hurricanes by the amount of damage they create. Now that wasn't a very complete model, so to provide some adjustments, Robert Simpson, a former director of the National Hurricane Center, expanded to include 4 different main criteria. So then they began measuring them by barometric pressure, wind speed, storm surge, and damage potential. So in addition to that scale, an additional scale named the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Damage Intensity Scale measures the damage possible by a categorized storm. So a Category 1 storm would inflict minimal damage on the area. Winds of 74 to 95 miles per hour could be expected. A storm surge of 3 to 5 feet would be common. Now in this, just some mobile homes that aren't anchored down would probably see some damage, and some tree limbs and shrubs and things would be lying around. Moving from there, we'd have a Category 2 storm. More moderate damage should be expected. Winds of 96 to 110 miles per hour. Storm surge from 6 to 8 feet. Much larger trees could possibly be uprooted, especially with the amount of rain that you might experience. Roof damage would be common, and then especially along the coastline, there would probably be a little bit more damage than a Category 1. Moving from there, a Category 3 would experience extensive damage. Winds from 111 to 130 miles per hour with a storm surge of 9 to 12 feet. That would cause damage at least 1,500 feet from the coastline. You would expect flooding. Up to 8 miles inland, you would experience major damage to structures. Moving from there, you have a Category 4 that would cause extreme damage. Winds from 131 to 155 miles per hour. Storm surge, you would expect to have 13 to 18 feet. That would cover complete buildings. You would have major damage to all structures. Then you'd have a Category 5 storm, which would be catastrophic damage. Winds greater than 155 miles per hour and a storm surge of greater than 18 feet. Severe damage to all structures that would be there. Within 1,500 feet of the shore, you would probably just completely have foundations wiped away, homes wiped away. The area would need to be completely evacuated if a storm would be affecting the coastline. As horrible as the different categories may sound, the U.S. is no stranger to any of them. The National Hurricane Center report about Hurricane Katrina described it as one of the most devastating national disasters in U.S. history. Katrina roared on shore as a strong Category 3 hurricane, down from a Category 5 storm when it was roaming around the Gulf of Mexico. According to the Weather Channel, Katrina's damage amounted to $81 billion. 1,833 people lost their lives. Western Mississippi experienced the greatest storm surge of 24 to 28 feet, which devastated the low-lying areas. Another name striking terror when referring to hurricanes is Hurricane Andrew. According to the NOAA, Andrew made landfall as the third most intense hurricane in U.S. history. Officially a Category 4 at its first U.S. landfall, a wind gust was measured in southern Florida at a private home of 177 miles per hour. Officially, let's see here, before the practice of naming hurricanes, the Florida Keys Labor Day hurricane in 1935 was the most intense hurricane recorded to make landfall in U.S. history. The NOAA states this hurricane was responsible for at least 400 deaths. Unfortunately, no wind measurements were taken at that time. These few hurricanes are just a taste of what Mother Nature might have to dish up. Although you may have more information now under your belt about hurricanes, don't expect an evacuation of your Indiana homestead anytime soon. Whether it forms in the Gulf of Mexico or in the Atlantic, whether it strengthens from a Category 1 storm to a Category 5, if we endure a hurricane more costly than Katrina, you hopefully will be able to have better knowledge of hurricanes. With this knowledge, I hope you'll be able to decipher what meteorologists are talking about this next hurricane season.